The US government would say, and many of your critics point out, that when you left America, you went to Hong Kong, part of communist China, and you identified NSA cyber targets in China to the South China Morning Post. Even some of your supporters, William Binney among them, the former NSA whistleblower, criticized you for doing that. Binney said you went, quote, a little too far and were in danger of, quote, transitioning from a whistleblower to a traitor.
So I point out that William Binney, who I actually know, I've spoken with, he has said that that's not an accurate characterization of what he meant in that interview. He had not actually read the story at the time because I wasn't providing any information to Chinese journalists. I didn't reveal anything. And in fact, I have never published a single story. That was a story run by an Australian journalist, another Western journalist. And it was about not hacking of Chinese military targets. It was about hacking critical infrastructure, hospitals, universities, traffic light systems, things that put lives at risk, which if they were done in any part of the world, represent a threat to public safety. And to say that, this was a danger to the United States, I think is completely unfair.
What about the Washington Post story that's often cited, which revealed, based on your leaks, that the US government was listening into the phone calls of Taliban fighters? Surely that's completely justified surveillance. Surely you and I would agree that spying on the Taliban is fine.
Of course, of course. I'm
so
actually a strong proponent of individualized. Well, so I don't make the decisions, and this has been very clear. I think we've sort of gone into this too quick without setting up the context.
Please.
Which is that I've never published any story. When I shared documents with the journalists, I made them agree that they would publish no story that was not, in their estimation, not my own, a service to the public interest and would cause no specific harm to any United States interest or any individual person, or basically put anyone at threat to any harm whatsoever. And the journalists in every case have gone to the government in advance of publication and said, is it all right that we publish this detail, this detail, this detail, and no harm will come of it? And the government has in no case made a specific showing that an individual would come to harm as a result of this. So there is a tremendous harm mitigation process on the front end to ensure that everything that ends up on the front page I
appreciate that perspective.
Beyond that,
go on, please.
So beyond that, to actually address the central criticism, I am not in a position, and I don't think any individual should be in a position, in the United States at least, of telling the press what they should and should not publish. That is the role of the free press in our model of government, in our society. You and I can argue about whether or not we think these stories are appropriate or inappropriate, and there are many stories with which I agree or disagree strongly that the newspapers ran these.
Was the Taliban Washington Post one of them? Was the Taliban Washington Post?
Well, I'm not going to characterize a particular story, but what
do you agree with?
What I will say.
Do you agree with the fact that they ran that story about spying on the Taliban?
Again, I don't think it's my place to criticize the decisions of the journalists and the newspapers who are making these decisions. I am not a journalist. That's not my role. Now, the central question that you asked there was, why would these documents be shared with journalists in the first place, were that the case? And there's actually a very obvious and very clear reason for this, which is if only documents of extreme, wrongdoing, of all of the horribles that the government has been doing, where they've been monitoring all the communications of everybody in the United States. It's never stopped an imminent terrorist attack, and that's the government's own claim at this point, not my own. We would get a very biased view of the actual work of the NSA, and we would have sort of torches and pitchforks on the street. But the bottom line is some of these programs actually are valuable, and some of them do serve a real purpose. And if journalists do not have that context, they can't make a real public interest determination of where those lines should be drawn.